are older, right? Because it's open during the day. The residents in the area are older, and it is functionally, a senior place. But we haven't been talking about it like that. We haven't been paying attention to that demographic. We have just been running our programs and not really thinking about, who are we really serving, and how do we serve them in a specific way? For the example that you're giving about the start times. It may just be a matter of having a program earlier during the day and adjusting financially for what that means, right? So that means you're not necessarily going to have a full house at a 2 p.m. show, but how do you adjust for that so that it's feasible? And I think it's just a matter of becoming more aware and then figuring out how you make those adjustments.
Yeah, anecdotally, I have a kind of a story. In one of our classes, Ignite, we noticed that our demographics tend to shift towards, we have younger folks in there too, but if I had to guess without looking at our stats, an average age, it would be between 35 and 40, right? And these are people who are coming to take this class. It's an 8-week entrepreneurship class, who have established careers or have been working for a while in the arts. We had this series of questions at the beginning of the course about goal setting, and it's like, where do you see yourself, in 5 years? Where do you see yourself, next year? And one of them was like, where do you see yourself when you're 70? And we had to really we adjusted that from 60 to 70 because when people were older. We had someone come through our class, and she started a new music ensemble when she was 70. So those were some of the adjustments that we made, and it's a small adjustment, but I think it was a recognition of, okay, people are really in their 60s and they're not looking at retirement, and they're looking at, how am I going to pay the bills, the next month, and you're right, things like bequests are, to arts organizations are becoming rarer because of the shifts also in demographics and the economy. Also, it changes our way of thinking about leaving money as well. We're more inclined to leave to children or family as opposed to an organization. So it's interesting.
I find it interesting that you were saying that the organization can find a market here. What constitutes as art? That's my first question, because I think people have to start thinking outside of the box, primarily with older citizens. For example, in the South, there's a large demographic, that's really into, say, for example, blues music. If you tie that interest regionally, you will find a lot more quote-unquote artists. Whereas a lot of times people don't think of blues music as art. Mm-hmm. Secondly, as far as a lot of older people, they like to tell their stories. So with that, there's an opportunity for filmmaking and storytelling. Just sit them in front. And I saw a really interesting YouTube video, and some of you may have even seen this, where someone interviewed an older gentleman. He just talked about his life and told stories, but someone animated it. So it just brought a whole new life and a whole new perspective to that project. So with that being said, I think there's a wealth of different genres or different, aspects of art to which we can, allow them to patronize as well.
Yeah, no, I agree. The Creatives Project just did a project where they had young kids taking photos largely of older people. Yeah. WonderRoot's done a project with that in their neighborhood, gentrification. Mm-hmm. I would guess some of the problem is geography. Mm-hmm. If I think about Georgia as having, whatever it is, 903 arts organizations, half of those are in Metro Atlanta, half of those are in the city of Atlanta. And I love the city of Atlanta. I'm a resident, love the mayor. Right? You can say that too.
Is he listening? Are you listening? Is he funding the arts? Is he funding the arts?
He's funding the arts. He's funding the arts.
He's funding the arts like nobody else in Georgia, really. But if I think about the population of, because I'm a region guy, right? But I think about the population of Atlanta being around 500,000, and our region being closer to 5 million. Yeah. So 90% of the people don't live in the city of Atlanta. but that's where over half the arts organizations are. I think about access. And so I think about places like the Aurora Theater out in Gwinnett. So you commented on you have to shift the start times, maybe you're not going to get the audience, but the Aurora Theater started doing afternoon programming because they've got seniors out there. Those shows all sell out because they're taking art to where people are.
Right.
Most of our arts organizations are not, and most of the bigger problem is most of the assets are not across the region. Over 90% of the arts assets are in the city of Atlanta. There aren't as many facilities across the region to be doing programming closer to where that audience actually is. And so, for me, I wonder a lot of it is, access to resources, access to organizations and facilities.
I saw a couple of hands, so I wanted to, are there any questions right now that from our participants here would like to ask?
I wanted to add one thing.
Yeah.
When you were talking about that some of the artists come through the program and you ask them, what do you see yourself doing when you're 70 instead of 60? I think a lot of that, I see that a lot with some of the artists that come through to me to talk to me about their career. And I think some of the examples that I've seen has to do that they finally have time for their art. Like they finally have, they've done their career, they've raised their children. I know my kids are out the house. I can do more things. And finally like, okay, what's the art thing happening? What's going on here?
Yeah. And some of it was that, and I think some of it was also back in, when the economy tanked out, there were artists who were making really great money, with art commissions, but I think a lot of it, bottomed out a little bit for artists. And then we also had artists who were also teaching, and the teaching was making up part of their art portfolio. And they lost jobs at local universities because they were cutting back on staff. So the other question I always ask when I go to universities and I'm talking to 20-something-year-olds is, how many of you want to retire? Everybody's going to raise their hand, and then the next question is, well, how many of you are saving right now? Because I think. Because the 10-year difference between saving, starting in your 20s to save and starting in your 30s and saving, when you factor in compounding interest, you're looking at like $600,000. So I know for me, I've tapped out my 401k before to pay for bills, and so there are these like multiple issues here. I hope my kids are going to take care of me. My youngest one says she will, and my oldest one's like, I don't know. So jury's out there. Pick one.
So what was learning in this panel is to have kids. I'll take care of
Cool. Were there any more questions? Any comments, thoughts? It's funny because I feel like even though we kind of shifted from organizational participation and looking at influences of other types of art and disciplines to the shifts and arts coming out of the building and into the community, and then talking about aging populations. For me, there's a unifying theme, and that comes down to community art, community-based art, or at least community-influenced art. So
I have a question for everyone, and I'd like everyone to take a moment to answer. As an artist, because I love to draw, I love to paint, I love interacting with people. If I was to come and try to pitch you a project that has to do with the community, what are you looking for, and what are some of the things, standards that you feel would help the community that you're focused on and that you serve? So somebody can start.
Okay, I'll start. So the Office of Cultural Affairs has two primary funding programs: Contracts for Art Services, and then Power to Give, which is a Kickstarter type of program for arts organizations. We match the funds that the arts organizations raise up to $5,000. So in terms of what types of programs that we're looking for, most of the programs that are funded, it's primarily funding organizations. We're one of the only municipalities in the region, I believe, that funds individual artists. I'll go as big as the region.
You're one of the only people in the world left.
Individual artists. So, so as there's an opportunity as an individual artist to create a program that will have some impact on the community. And there's a lot of room. It's relatively new for us, in fact, the individual artist funding.
Been around for a long time.
Yeah.
I got
Okay.
an individual artist grant years and years ago.
Okay.
But it's, thank God.
Yeah. I thought it had gone away and it had come back
Well,
very
that's
recently.
possible.
Okay. Yeah.
You're right, because the state used to
I mean,
have
I
a
got
program
one
in the county as well.
In
Yeah.
2005.
Okay.
And it's been steady since at least 2005.
Okay. So, but with the other grants, it's arts organizations that we're funding, and so there's a variety of criteria, but we're looking for arts organizations that have programming that positively impacts the community. So,
I will say that, one of the important things about public funding from my perspective, as somebody who runs an organization that's been a recipient of, and also as a person, as a citizen who sat on panels to review those grants, is that even right now when it's not a ton of money, you're still being vetted through a democratic process, right? And you're held accountable for things like your audience reach and outreach and in-reach programming and things like that. Often, other foundations may not, or they may, but they may not have the same criteria. So, I think it's an important seal of approval for us as an organization to say that we're funded by these different entities publicly, because we're stewards of public money, and we have to demonstrate that we're using that money in a way that serves the people.
So, okay, well, I would like the rest to answer that question also, and not necessarily that you fund those, programs, but that you champion them and support them, and even like the dashboard co-op, what is it that you saw that you're able to do with the community, and how does that work?
My turn. And I am on the dashboard board of directors. I don't know if anybody knew that. I didn't mention that before. And dashboard's very interesting, and I've only been involved in a board capacity for about a year now. But before that, and how I got engaged with them was through their needing spaces, needing something to do, and being sort of tapped into potential venues, including this building, a building across the street. And what I would say to answer the question, if you were trying to approach me as to sort of what to do, particularly here in downtown, it's a very challenging environment, very complex. We joked here last Tuesday that this is the sort of arts and bureaucracy district of the city of Atlanta. That you've got all those great sort of cultural institutions and things that are going on, but there's a whole lot of red tape, there's a whole lot of mazes to sort of crawl through. But it can be very rewarding as well. And I think what the arts and artists can bring to the table is we don't get the same sort of no, that's impossible, or sort of naysaying attitude that, it's going to take too long, or it's going to cost too much money, or we don't have the capacity we need to do it, but that let's keep thinking about it, let's keep working at it, and we'll find a different solution. We'll maybe find a different problem or question we're trying to answer, but that we can work on that and make something positive that happens out of it. So I think with Dashboard, not every space is worked out, not everything is, the plan has been written, and then the plan evolves, the plan changes, it adjusts, it adapts. We're looking at doing some stuff in Detroit, and the timetable shifts because the real world happens. But I think continue to engage in that process and think about how things are happening, and willing to sort of shift and move. Same thing with Elevate. Elevate's not what it was the first year. Everything that we do is evolved and changed and adapted and grown and contracted and expanded again. And I think just being part of that process and not afraid of a certain timetable or a certain sort of budget constraint that might present itself early on, but that we'll find a resource or tap into some connection we don't necessarily know that either of us have right now. But if we think about it, we'll figure that out and plug in at a regional level, or we'll find out, that maybe shifting the starting times or doing whatever else, we can find a way to make something happen if we really wanted to make it happen.
Cool. So I guess it's my turn now. Yeah. So I have a question for the crowd. And Corey, you probably already know this, but what is